Out of nowhere, the patriarch drops a bombshell, announcing that an engagement to Archduke Valdrova has already been decided. He slams the official marriage document onto the wooden desk without an ounce of hesitation. Standing inside the grand office, our boy silently listens as his fate gets handed down without his consent. Ferda Risnova never had a say in his own life, but this forced arrangement takes things too far. He hangs his head, feeling the cold weight of the arrangement sink deep into his chest. Shock washes over his face as he realizes the sheer cruelty behind this decision. Marrying into the infamous Archduke family is nothing less than a hidden execution warrant. The head of the house sits comfortably behind his desk, fully aware that this marriage is a death sentence. Refusing the arrangement means getting thrown out onto the streets without a single coin to his name. Accepting the match means walking straight into a viper pit where he will be torn apart. All he ever wanted was to be accepted as a true member of this household. Years ago, young Ferda pushed his fragile body past its limits every single day just to prove his worth. As the sickly, illegitimate third son, he ran laps around the courtyard while the mansion's servants gossiped and mocked his useless efforts. The staff laughed behind his back, claiming he had not shown an ounce of improvement despite years of sweat. They called his dedication pathetic, whispering that hard work could never replace natural talent. Doubling over in exhaustion, sweat dripped onto the cold stone cobblestones while his lungs burned for air. Clutching his heavy training sword, he glanced up toward the top floor of the mansion with faint hope in his heart. His father stood by the window frame, watching the young boy train with a cold and unreadable glare. Ferda forced a bright smile, desperate for even a single nod of approval from his father. Instead, his arrogant relative stepped up with a sword tossed over his shoulder, scoffing that a talentless weakling must be completely out of his mind to pursue night training. After easily beating him to the dirt, the silver-haired bully declared that an illegitimate son never possessed the right to swing a blade in the first place. Cursing his blue eyes, the bully hurled bitter insults while tears welled up in his eye. The harsh words left a deep scar on his soul that time could never heal. As the bully walked away laughing, Ferda watched him leave in bitter silence. The head of the house abandoned him to his misery without offering a shred of comfort. Left alone on the cold ground, darkness enveloped his heart as he realized no amount of effort would ever change his status. Back in the present, Ferda looks his father in the eyes and declares that he will officially leave the family instead of accepting the marriage. The patriarch gazes back with absolute indifference, unbothered by his son stepping away forever. Without a single moment of hesitation or regret, the patriarch gives his final response. He utters two cold words, granting permission for his own blood to walk away. The massive iron gates slam shut behind Ferda, locking him out of the estate with nothing but a small sack of belongings. His aristocratic surname is stripped away in an instant, severing his last link to nobility. Walking down the solitary road, our boy leaves the grand mansion behind while the cold gaze of his father lingers over him one last time. He realized his father knew how hard he struggled all these years, yet never cared. Ferda looks down at his trembling palm, covered in deep calluses from countless hours of relentless sword practice. Red aura crackles through his dark hair as intense anger boils up inside him. A dangerous glint flares in his eye while his fist tightly clutches his formal collar. A massive crimson magic circle rotates into existence around him, flaring with dark power. Walking down the cobbled street with his small bag, our boy leaves the noble territory behind as faint red flames trail his steps. Dual magic circles shimmer in his mind as he remembers the day his true power awakened. Years ago, bullies cornered him in a school restroom, knocking him down and soaking him with water. They laughed in his face, claiming a talentless brat like him would take decades to learn basic magic. Our boy did not care about standard magic or their pathetic rules. Blood trickled down his face as dark mana violently erupted, terrifying every single bully in the room. A crimson magic circle manifested directly before their eyes. With glowing purple eyes, he condensed dark magic into his hands, unleashing power fed by pure rage. His magic operated differently from normal mages because it fed directly on hatred and revenge. A violent red blast tore through the classroom, hurling his abusers backward. Plumes of dark crimson smoke filled the space as the dust settled over the wreckage. The deeper his hatred ran, the stronger he became. Walking past the defeated bullies on the shattered floor, dark electricity crackled from his hands as he walked away. Crimson static flickers as his memories drift deeper into the dark path he walked. After reaching the sixth circle purely through vengeance, only one target remained on his list. He had to return to the place that ruined his life, the Resnova household. Under a blood-red moon, he returned to the grand estate that once cast him aside. Using dark magic, he mind-controlled the cruel servants into turning on each other with daggers. Next, he drove a wedge between the noble brothers, turning their greed into absolute mutual hatred. Blood soaked the expensive carpet where the eldest sons lay dead by each other's hands. Finally, only the patriarch remained, the father he despised above all else. Stepping into the main study, dark magic heralded the arrival of the final confrontation. Cornered in his study, the broken father cowered in terror and begged to die. Shadows swallowed the study as dark, oppressive manner wrapped completely around the trembling old noble. Grabbing his father by the neck, our guy forced him to witness the carnage. The patriarch completely broke down after witnessing the absolute hell brought upon his household. Standing before the shattered window, Ferda stared down at the collapsed old noble. Fallen bodies littered the floor, wiping out every remaining member of the household. Just like that, every single thing connected to the Resnova family vanished forever. With blood splattered across his neck, our boy reflected on his completed vengeance. Red energy crackled across his eye as the memory faded to the present. The residual aura vanished, returning his full focus to the path ahead. As the residual aura faded, the dark landscape of the ravine came into view. Now standing atop a moonlit ravine in his cloak, shadowy figures along distant cliffs watch his every move. Years ago, Ferda survived against all odds, stepping past fallen enemies as he pushed his power beyond limits. He broke through every barrier to master the eighth circle, attaining magic so vast that monarchs bowed. Achieving the title of Archmage gave him the ultimate strength needed to shield himself from retribution. Enemies would eventually seek revenge, just as he had hunted those who destroyed his past. He aimed for the ninth circle, a mythical domain reserved for demigods. The ninth circle, the realm of a demigod. His relentless search finally yielded an answer hidden within forgotten lore. He carefully opened the heavy, dust-covered tome, turning through its dark, fragile parchment leaves to find the specific passage. A faded page detailed an ancient beast, causing Ferda to freeze as he read the text. Wondering if fate was playing a cruel joke on him, intense hatred flared in his heart. The ancient text identified the beast as the Red Dragon, Archduke Valdrova, a legendary monster of unmatched power. This mythical entity held the key to unlocking the power he desperately required. The Red Dragon, Archduke Valdrova, back in the present, standing among moonlit canyon ruins, Ferda finally comes face to face with his target. She finds it almost laughable that this fragile human actually arrived, expecting to end her life. Blood trickles down Ferda's lips as he gnashes his teeth in absolute hatred. He screams with total fury, ordering the tyrant Valdrova to perish right here. The giant dragon remains utterly calm, admitting she is well aware that humans view her as a wicked tyrant. She insists she never once left this cave, questioning why he harbors such deep resentment. He snaps back furiously, asking if this monster genuinely considers herself blameless. Crimson energy flares inside his glowing eye as pure vengeance consumes his gaze. He roars directly at the beast, declaring that she is the single cause of every tragedy in his life. Ferda points directly at the dragon, openly mocking her foolish dream of finding a human lover. Dark memories fracture across his mind as old trauma resurfaces. Overwhelmed by lingering anguish, his rage boils over as old trauma completely fractures his sanity. He screams about how pathetic it was for a wild beast to pursue a human partner. Overwhelmed by intense hatred, Ferda screams in raw fury as painful memories break his composure. He curses the monster for utterly destroying his life with her bizarre fantasy. Uncontrollable aura erupts around Ferda as his burning malice fills the entire chamber. Hearing his harsh words, the giant dragon visibly flinches, her massive claw shuddering against stone. Ferda glares through the rising dust, his face fixed in an unyielding sneer. Panting heavily on the ground, he spits out that whatever excuse she had for her past actions is meaningless now. The dragon rises to her full height, towering over Ferda with blazing power that threatens to crush him. Without warning, the massive beast strikes down with her lethal claws to crush the intruder. Ferda frantically erects a magic barrier to absorb the blow, crying out under the pressure. A sudden shock wave of red energy bursts out with sickening force. Violent tearing sounds ring out as intense crimson light ruptures across the cavern floor. Blood droplets splash over Ferda's pale face, causing his blue eyes to widen in complete disbelief. Instead of striking, the dragon plunges her own sharp claws straight into her chest, tearing her scales wide open. Ferda stares in complete horror, utterly confused why the creature would inflict such a fatal wound on herself. He braces his trembling legs against the cracked ground, unable to process the insane spectacle happening right in front of him. Realizing what she intends to do, pure terror flashes through his dilated eyes. His voice echoes violently off the cavern walls as he shouts with everything he has got. He screams at the top of his lungs, desperate to halt her suicidal action. Blinding radiance streams from her chest as the dragon plunges deeper for her heart. Ferda refuses to allow her to break her core before he can claim it. He extends his hand, summoning every remaining drop of dark mana to stop her. A dark crimson shock wave pulses violently through the entire cavern. He curses in frustration as the overwhelming magical forces clash in midair. A blinding burst of energy erupts, engulfing the entire cavern in a searing red flash. Smoke rises from her scales as she sways weakly, unable to stand her ground. Fatally wounded, the gigantic red dragon sways unsteadily as her massive body begins to lose balance. The dragon collapses heavily onto the hard ground, making Ferda sprint forward as he realizes what just happened. The mighty beast crashes heavily onto the shattered floor, causing Ferda to sprint forward in absolute alarm. He frantically wonders whether the dragon's vital heart was completely destroyed during her heavy collapse. Inspecting her up close, Ferda catches the gleaming reflection of a radiant golden core resting in her giant palm. To his complete shock, he realizes her sacred core somehow survived the crash completely unharmed. Ferda stands completely frozen in disbelief as the dying dragon gently holds out her glowing heart toward him. A blinding flash of radiant energy bursts forth from the sacred heart. A profound wave of confusion washes over Ferda as he struggles to comprehend her peaceful gesture. He questions why she would surrender her power when she had enough strength left to destroy him. Tears stream down her massive face as she offers her very life force to the young man. In a faint voice, her memory reveals she hated herself for a very long time. As her mind connects with his, she confesses how deeply she loathed her own cursed existence. Flashbacks reveal how the dragon spent centuries curled up alone, despising the violent dragon blood running through her veins. Her violent predatory instincts constantly drove her to commit terrible acts of brutal savagery. She felt completely helpless whenever her inner monster awoke and took full control over her. Whenever her powers raged out of control, whole villages burned to ashes while innocent civilians fled in pure panic. Every step she took brought destruction, causing everyone to view her as a terrifying monster. Sobbing amidst the burning ruins, she truly believed her death was the only peaceful answer. Despite bringing destruction wherever she went, her soul secretly yearned for simple happiness during her tragic life. A single glowing tear slips from her eye as her heartbreaking memory comes to an end. Looking down at him lovingly, the dragon hopes her power can bring him the joy she was always denied. An ethereal silhouette captures the poignant final moment between the dragon and the young man. A sudden wave of nausea hits him hard, leaving a bitter ache inside his soul. He grimaces in agony, deeply overwhelmed by the tragic sorrow embedded within her dragon mana. Ferda curses Valdrova under his breath for leaving him with such an overwhelming emotional burden. He feels like the ancient beast is trying to manipulate his mind, even in her final moments. Ferda screams in frustration, trying to resist her heavy emotional influence on his mind. The dragon's colossal body crumbles into glowing particles, leaving only her divine heart behind. Gazing at the suspended core, he realizes the path to the ninth circle lies right before him. Ferda reaches up to accept the golden core, absorbing the dragon's sacred energy straight into his chest. The overwhelming surge of energy rushes downward through his torso. At first, the divine magic settles into his inner sea like a single drop of water. Blinding golden light ruptures from his chest as raw dragon mana overflows every boundary. The sheer atmospheric pressure detonates outward with unstoppable kinetic energy. This ultimate surge of primordial magic begins transforming his mortal vessel into a demigod. An unimaginable surge of primordial power erupts, initiating a grand transformation that will rebirth him as a demigod. Fractured space itself crumbles around him under the immense weight of his evolution. A massive pillar of holy light shoots skyward, swallowing the entire cavern. A stylized title graphic glows against the light of the void. He panics in confusion as his mind drifts through the void. Massive crimson strands entangle his soul, dragging him down into the dark abyss. The crimson tendrils completely entangle his soul, pulling him deep into the dark abyss. Before him sits the lonely, tragic silhouette of the red dragon in human form. He realizes this terrifying mental link is a direct side effect of absorbing her heart. Century upon century of suppressed suffering press down on his mind. Sitting in absolute silence, she holds her body tight from centuries of suppressed pain. Suddenly, a brilliant flash of raw emotion pierces through the darkness of her memories. A shock wave of pure spiritual magic strikes Ferda's forehead, leaving him stunned as her final feelings flood his mind. His hands drop down as the shock of her memories overwhelms him. The core of her soul was not filled with violent hatred or mindless fury at all. Behind her terrifying dragon form lay a deeply sorrowful existence who felt completely insignificant and abandoned by the world. Her deepest emotions surged through the spiritual connection, revealing her true heart to him. All her soul ever longed for was a gentle affection to embrace the world until the very end. Overwhelmed by her unbearable agony, he breaks down in tears as her sorrow crushes him. Horrified by the terrible truth, he asks himself in utter despair what he has done. A poignant vision unfolds before him, showing quiet young boy sitting completely isolated from everyone. The child silently works on a small drawing, desperately searching for warmth in his lonely life. Gripping his crayon with all his strength, he carefully pours his unspoken feelings onto the paper. The finished sketch reveals a crude drawing of a happy family holding hands, his ultimate dream. A soft smile touches the boy's face, while the ghostly figure slowly dissolves into glowing light. High in her isolated tower, the red dragon woman gazes into the open sky, wondering if he shared her exact same wish. Snapping back to the grim reality, the memory ends as the harsh truth crushes his soul. Blood drips down his battered face as he comes to terms with the terrible deed he just committed. Standing frozen over her body, he gazes at his hands in horror, knowing he killed her. He remains rooted to the blood-stained floor, completely paralyzed by overwhelming guilt and unbearable remorse. Tears fill his eyes as the tragic truth of her existence strikes him like a sledgehammer. Swearing to undo this terrible outcome, ancient magic begins gathering in the air around him. The legendary magic circle flares with golden light as he channels his remaining life force. Ancient runes align across the array to activate the forbidden ultimate spell wish. Glowing runes lock into position, focusing the immense energy needed to rewrite time. The central eye emblem opens wide, sealing his desperate desire to alter fate. Kneeling inside the golden seal, he sacrifices his soul to rewind time and reshape history. Ferda snaps back to reality, his eyes widening in shock as his future memories flood his mind. He finds himself back in the sunlit study, where his father sits waiting at the desk. The old man scolds him sternly, demanding to know why he is spacing out while his father speaks. Recognizing this exact memory, he suddenly realizes today is the cursed day that ruined his entire life. His father coldly announces that his political engagement to Archduke Valdrova has officially been decided. As his father reminds him what this marriage entails, he mentally prepares his next move. As the older noble man reminds him what this marriage truly entails, Ferda keeps his composure and silently plans his next move. A subtle smile plays on his lips as he prepares to turn this unfair situation around. Stepping firmly toward the desk, he prepares to deliver a response nobody expected. Ferda calmly agrees to the terms without hesitation. His sudden compliance catches the seated older noble man completely off guard. Knowing the dragon heart now binds their souls, Ferda officially accepts the engagement to Archduke Valdrova to save her. Hukin can hardly believe his foolish younger brother actually agreed to marry into the terrifying Valdrova family without even resisting. He admits the boy might cry and beg for mercy, but willingly walking straight into a death trap makes zero sense. The butler reports that Ferda kicked out his servants and remains locked inside his room. Hukin chuckles to himself, totally convinced his cowardly brother is hiding inside and crying in terror. Meanwhile, inside the bedroom, Ferda stands quietly as heavy footsteps approach the door. Hukin kicks the door wide open and yells Ferda's name, eager to mock a sobbing mess. But his smug smile vanishes the exact second he looks inside the room. Ferda stands completely composed, already fully dressed in his noble coat with luggage packed. Hyukin expected crying and screaming, yet Ferda is calmly preparing to leave on his own. Stunned by the sight, Hyukin stammers out whether he seriously dressed himself without any help from servants. He laughs it off with a fake cough, trying to hide how thoroughly thrown off he feels. Ferda cuts right to the point, asking if this arrangement means getting kicked out of the family. Our protagonist looks back with cold blue eyes, completely unbothered by his arrogant brother. Hyukin stammers in confusion, unable to process how his weak brother became so bold overnight. Ferda speaks softly, well aware of the terrifying history behind Duke Valdrova's bloody family line. In the past, the tyrant dragon's very first fiancé was none other than the Empire's third prince. That young prince was adored by everyone across the realm for his unmatched intelligence and handsome looks. He was so popular that he turned down the throne just to volunteer as the tyrant dragon's fiancé. Yet kneeling before that monstrous red beast turned out to be far worse than anyone ever imagined. Even that brilliant prince ended up completely traumatized and broken under the dragon's overwhelming presence. The dark, horrific outcome of that arrangement left a permanent bloody stain on imperial history. Snapping back to the present, Hyukin points a finger at Ferda, trying to regain control. Waving his hand casually, he mocks Ferda and warns him not to attempt anything stupid. He strictly warns Ferda never to think about defying the family or running away from the engagement. Our boy glares back silently, his sharp gaze cutting straight through his brother's empty threats. Veins pop all over Hyukin's face as he completely loses his temper at that quiet defiance. He tries to lunge forward in a fury, but the butler barely restrains him while Ferda casually turns away. Ferda smirks, remarking that his handsome face is far too valuable to let a petty bruise ruin it. Outside the estate, a luxury carriage stands ready in the bright courtyard to take him away. Carrying his suitcase, Ferda walks out toward the grand gates without looking back once. The old butler pulls out a handkerchief and begins dabbing at fake tears. He weeps dramatically into his handkerchief, putting on a grand show of heartbreak for his departing young master. The butler cries out that serving Ferda for all these years was an absolute honor, as the boy loads his trunk. Ferda watches him with a dark look, knowing full well that if serving him was an honor, the old snake would never have poisoned his food. He remembers lying sick in bed as a child, while the butler and maid watched him with cold, sinister eyes. Remembering how that fake butler served him poisoned meals during his childhood makes Ferda's blood boil. Every single memory of those dark childhood days leaves a deeply bitter taste in his mouth. Part of him wants nothing more than to grab the old man's neck and squeeze tight. In his mind, he chokes the living daylight out of the traitorous servant right then and there. Back in reality, our boy simply reaches out and rests a friendly hand on the old man's shoulder. Ferda mockingly fake sympathizes with the butler, acknowledging how exhausting it must have been dealing with him all these years. Flashing a pleasant smile, Ferda gets right in the old butler's face and enjoys watching him squirm in terror. He politely asks the servant to look after the family before his carriage finally rolls away from the estate. Riding through the quiet forest, he realizes that the burning hatred driving his actions for years has completely vanished. All the rage and thirst for revenge he carried for years suddenly begin to fade away into the breeze. Riding through the peaceful forest, he feels his lingering anger and thirst for vengeance finally fade away. Looking into the window glass, he catches the reflection of the fragile, battered child he used to be. Back in his previous life, absorbing dark malice transformed him into a bloodthirsty monster who slaughtered entire armies. Through constant exposure to poisons, his body gradually developed an incredible resistance to corrupt energy. Eventually, he learned to harness that sinister power on his own terms without losing his mind. A dark core now beats steadily inside his chest, keeping the black magic safely contained. Returning to the present, he slowly closes his eyes and lets the motion of the carriage calm him. Resting his head back against the seat cushion, he finally relaxes now that his terrible family is far away. Quiet sigh slips past his lips as he enjoys his newfound freedom. Before long, the driver halts the carriage and loudly announces that they have reached the border. A warning sign beside the path clearly states that entering the Duke's territory is strictly forbidden. Unloading his single suitcase, Ferda sits down on his luggage while waiting in the quiet forest. The driver quickly turns the horses around and speeds off, abandoning our boy in the wilderness. Resting his cheek on his hand, He ponders how peaceful it feels without family spies watching him. Suddenly, a soft rustle in the bushes catches his attention, and he turns his gaze toward the tree line. Among the tall grass, a quiet shadow steps out from the thick woodland foliage. A silver-haired maid wearing a neat apron dress steps forward and bows politely in greeting. She politely asks if he is Lord Ferda Resnova, checking to confirm his identity. Gesturing toward the distant mountain, she offers to guide him up to the massive castle peak. High above the realm, a red banner bearing the royal Pegasus emblem flutters proudly in the sunlight. The citizens of the Arkan Empire were intoxicated by the pride and absolute security of their nation. Terrifying serpents and giant beasts swarmed the border walls, threatening to butcher everyone in sight. The one who halted the monster hordes advanced and claimed dominion over the front line. Armed with devastating power, the Duke commanded fiery beasts and turned the tide of the ancient war. Dark speed lines emphasize the tense and ominous atmosphere of the forbidden territory. Ferda trudges through the woods carrying his suitcase, wondering how a man who single-handedly defended humanity gets labeled as the demon dragon. Creeping shadows slip through the thick tree line, while unseen predators stalk their target from behind the foliage. Our boy freezes in his tracks when a pack of red-eyed wolves glides out from the dark brush. Silver Sword strikes slice through the air in a flash, instantly cutting down the ferocious beasts before they can reach him. Sheathing her sword effortlessly, the maid turns back and reassures Ferda that he has nothing to worry about. Her eyes gleam with a scary dragon slit, while emerald magic ripples across her fingers. Trotting along the forest path, she asks how much further they have left to hike. Glancing over her shoulder, her sharp gaze pins him right in place. Ferda struggles to climb over a fallen tree trunk while clutching his heavy suitcase and walking stick. White scales coat her powerful reptilian tail, exposing her true non-human nature. Possessing incredible innate strength, she keeps her dragon nature completely hidden from humans. Her powerful dragon form conceals both horns and innate magic. Drained of all energy, Ferda jams his walking stick into the dirt to stay upright. Ferda asks the maid if they can fly to the lair this time. She plainly refuses his request, stating she simply doesn't want to. Stuck on the dusty trail, our exhausted protagonist drags himself forward while she waits. Buckling under the weight of his heavy luggage, he desperately begs her for a brief break. Ferda smiles as they reach the destination, reflecting that getting married is never easy. A hand knocks firmly on the heavy door to announce their arrival. The maid announces through the closed doors that the fiancé has arrived. Ferda stands before the closed, heavy doors as an ominous energy radiates. She leads our nervous protagonist past the threshold into the quiet darkness. Ferda stares at his trembling hand, sensing an intimidating aura radiating from the room. Stopping right before the inner chamber, she sternly orders him to wait outside. Her eye glares with dragon menace, questioning if a mere mortal belongs here. Instantly switching back to a polite maid demeanor, she clears her throat and smiles as if nothing happened. The giant dragon manifestation radiates an overwhelming aura of pure deadly power. The giant red dragon looks down with an intense and imposing gaze. Ferda maintains complete composure, staring back without a single flinch. He begins his response, ready to explain why he traveled all this way. Reaching into his coat, our boy prepares to reveal his secret proposal. The maid staggers back in total shock at his fearlessly bold action. She glares in utter disbelief, wondering what absurd move he is making. He produces a massive cloth sack stuffed to the brim with glowing gold coins, ready to make his move. Ferda slams the giant bag of riches straight onto the stone floor, while the Dragon Lord commends his impressive resolve. Lounging on the gold, he tells the Duke to take this fortune and build a new life elsewhere. He plainly states that he has zero interest in accumulating power or riches for himself. Our protagonist's romantic speech echoes across the hall, declaring that his only desire is to be together with Duke Valdrova. Ferda kneels and makes his proposal to the Dragon Lord while the maid watches. Unimpressed by his pitch, the maid closes her eyes and clenches her fist in frustration. Without hesitation, the maid winds up and throws a rapid, deadly punch straight toward him. Ferda stays completely calm under her sharp glare, quietly taking in her angry command to leave. Ferda keeps his calm expression as he listens to her. Glaring back at him, her eyes burn with pure hostility. Sharp claws sprout from her fingers as green magic flares around her growing dragon horns. Green energy explodes as a massive draconic tail bursts out, revealing her true beast form. Ferda quickly throws his arms up in a guard to brace against the sudden shock wave. She snarls that opportunistic humans care nothing for Lord Valdrova and are driven entirely by selfish ambition. She condemns opportunistic mortals who care nothing for Lord Valdrova. Sweat drips down Ferda's face as he winces under her crushing aura. She remembers how previous nobles came only to scheme and exploit the royal marriage decree. The dragon maid recalls how a former suitor came with nothing, but schemes to subjugate her master. That greedy third prince knelt surrounded by gold, while offering fake promises to seal the deal. Her golden dragon eyes burned with absolute disgust at such a pathetic attempt at deception. She recalls how the previous fool failed to hide his blatant greed from her dragon lord. Furious at the memory, the dragon maid steps forward aggressively to crush this new intruder before he can cause any harm. Revealing her dragon tail, she pins Ferda to the ground and growls that he is no different from the rest. The dragon servant threatens him fiercely, asking if he wants the exact same lethal fate. Choking under her crushing pressure, Ferda clutches his coat and barely manages to breathe. Yet even while suffocating, Ferda looks right into her eyes and flashes a confident smile. Her eyes widen in shock as she senses absolute honesty without a single speck of deceit. A warm golden aura replaces the dark pressure, softening the heavy air around them. The atmosphere shifts completely as an ancient, warm memory begins to resurface between them. She remembers how the ancient dragon once curled protectively around a lonely soul in the dark. Offering glowing light from his open hands, Ferda smiles warmly to demonstrate his pure intent. His inner resolve rings loud and clear, promising to stand faithfully by her side. He finishes his declaration, vowing he came here specifically to become Valdrova's true fiancé. Ferda lies completely still on the cold stone floor, staring empty-eyed at the dark ceiling above. His neat suit collar stays pinned to his neck as he lies motionless in the gloomy hall. An intimidating shadowy figure suddenly looms over him, preparing to strike. Sharp blue claws flex through the air, radiating lethal killing intent. The angry dragon maid lunges down, roaring with fury over his outrageous words. But right before her sharp claws crush him, she suddenly halts in mid-air, switching tones instantly. She bends at the waist with extreme politeness and asks to be excused for a moment. She clasps her hands tightly with a cute sparkle in her eyes, putting on a harmless maid front. Flashback to her kneeling inside the dark cave, reporting every detail directly to her master. Deep within the lair, a gigantic dragon silhouette listens quietly to the maid report. Crimson scales gleam in the dark as the mighty beast shifts position. Archduke Valdrova listens closely, a subtle smirk forming on her lips. Archduke Valdrova listens intently, becoming genuinely intrigued by this mysterious human and wondering what kind of person he truly is. The maid initially describes Ferda as a pathetic human who struggled just carrying heavy luggage around, but her eyes glint with a sharp smirk as she gets ready to tell the real truth. The maid abruptly stops her weak cover story and corrects herself, getting ready to spill what actually happened. Standing before Valdrova, she continues explaining what actually happened during their meeting. Sighing deeply, the maid admits her first impression was completely wrong. Her face turns deadly serious as she describes the terrifying composure Ferda maintained. Even when she blasted him with lethal energy, Ferda stood completely unfazed without a single trace of fear. She assures her master that this guy can actually look directly into her eyes without breaking down. Suddenly, the maid eyes widen in complete shock at her mistress' reaction. She turns around bewildered as her master makes a shocking statement. Valdrova places a hand on her chest and tells her servant that she looks forward to meeting a human who can actually look her straight in the eye. A soft smile touches her face as she looks forward to speaking with someone normally for once. The maid stands frozen in utter disbelief over how excited her master has become. Looking down in defeat, she accepts that she cannot change her mistress' mind. Back in the present, she returns to Ferda and stiffly announces that her master agreed to proceed with the engagement. Guiding our boy through the massive stone corridor, she leads him toward his personal quarters. She opens the heavy doors to a sparkling, luxurious bedroom fit for royalty. Ferda looks around calmly while the maid begins arranging the bed behind him. She throws a bitter side eye at him, clearly unhappy about serving a human. Ferda points out her terrible attitude, completely unbothered as she huffs in frustration. While our boy stays totally relaxed, a chibai version of the maid fumes in anger, screaming inside how much she hates humans. With the decision finalized, a quiet engagement ceremony is arranged deep inside the dragon lair. Further adjusts his collar, remaining totally unfazed by the maid bitter aura. She watches him closely, waiting for him to break under the pressure. He rests his hand on his neck, silently pondering his situation in this massive lair. Not a single trace of panic shows on his face. The maid crosses her arms and glares at him in silence, clearly trying to judge his true motives. Ferda casually reminds her that this period is also a strict deadline to prove his qualifications. Hearing the word deadline catches her completely off guard. She snaps immediately, pointing her finger and yelling that the fiancé of a great ruler must possess matching status. Her finger stays jabbed right at his chest, as she demands he prove he is actually worthy to be a fiancé. Ferda just stares back with a deadpan look, completely unbothered by her dramatic outburst. She places a hand on her chest and proudly claims that challenging him is entirely her own choice. Looking down, she admits that her master is far too soft-hearted to reject anyone herself. Ferda clenches his bare fist tightly, as her words stir up memories from his past life. A heavy atmosphere settles over the room as his thoughts drift back in time. He remembers sitting upon a lonely Gothic throne, surrounded by massive dragon claws. Back then, the hostile crowd made it clear he would never be recognized as the partner of the Archduke. The harsh glares of angry nobles still echo clearly in his memory. Snapping back to the present, Ferda closes his eyes and lets out a quiet sigh. When his blue eyes open again, they flash with calm confidence. The maid stands tall before him, confident that her standards are impossibly high for any human. He recalls a giant dragon shedding tears, while offering its glowing heart to a cloaked figure. Our boy gestures nonchalantly, while the maid refuses to back down from her demands. He rests his hand on his chin and mutters that her demands are far easier said than done. A faint smirk forms on his face as he offers to demonstrate his true abilities right here. She glares back in utter disbelief, demanding to know why on earth he is so relaxed. While she fumes in absolute frustration, Ferda simply folds his arms with a casual smile. He extends his open hand toward her, promising to show her what he can really do. She gives him a doubtful side eye, convinced he is just bluffing. Night settles over the massive Gothic castle under a bright full moon. Outside, the grand Gothic estate stands dark and silent beneath the moonlit sky. Alone in his room, Ferda walks across the carpet toward his desk to begin practicing. He reflects on his unique advantage of having once reached the ultimate 8th circle of magic. That vast knowledge and high-level experience belongs solely to him. He holds out his palm as a brilliant orb of pure mana begins to manifest. Bright golden sparks break apart and fill the ambient air around him. For any mage, forming the very first circle is the absolute foundation of everything. Golden circuits light up inside his body, directing the raw energy straight to his core. This critical crossroads will permanently shape the path of his mana circuit going forward. Formulating mana circuits requires absolute focus. Blue mana represents calm meditation, forming a balanced stream of pure energy that slowly constructs a mage's inner circle. This foundation dictates every spell cast in the future. By maintaining total composure, a spellcaster constructs an unbreakable core capable of handling immense magical power. Most mages take this safe path, spending years sitting in deep meditation to slowly manifest a blue magic circle through pure patience and emotional control. On the other hand, a dark alternative exists for those driven by raw emotion rather than calm discipline. A crimson magic circle forms directly out of wrath, intense hatred, and unbridled dark obsession. Harnessing such volatile energy grants immediate power, but the cost to the spellcaster's mind is catastrophic. Instead of gaining true mastery, mages who walk this crimson path succumb to their own inner turmoil, ultimately driving themselves completely insane. In his previous life, Ferda walked that exact self-destructive road, ascending to become an archmage fueled purely by raw hatred. Flashback memories flood his mind of standing over defeated enemies in dark dungeons, consumed by endless vengeance and cold isolation. He knows better than anyone where that dark path leads, having paid the ultimate price in his previous lifetime. Back in the present, our boy clenches his jaw with firm resolve, refusing to repeat those same past mistakes. This time around, he will build his foundation properly through calm composure and absolute emotional mastery. Morning light breaks over the grand estate, as a brand new day begins across the castle grounds. Sitting cross-legged on the polished floor of his room, Ferda silently channels his inner energy under the warm sunlight. A brilliant orb of blue mana begins swirling between his palms, perfectly obeying his calm thoughts. Exhaling softly, he watches the blue mana circle settle neatly into his core, completing the foundation in just a single sitting. Normal mages require at least 3 years of intense meditation to achieve blue circle, yet his past life experience makes it look effortless. Moments later, the silver-haired maid enters his room carrying a fresh tray of warm soup for his meal. A hot bowl of cream soup filled with fresh vegetables sits right in front of him. Ferda quietly eats his breakfast while his maid stands behind him with her usual cold, unreadable expression. Chewing his food, he considers his next steps for training, realizing standard magic practice will not be enough. Suddenly, a heavy vibration shakes the entire room, causing the furniture and windows to rattle violently. Asking what is happening, the maid calmly informs him that the master of the house is currently out suppressing wild monsters nearby. Ferda perks up at the mention of monster suppression, intrigued by the sudden battle taking place. He glances toward the window, hearing distant thundering echoes vibrating across the bright open sky. Turning back to his maid, Ferda states that he wants to witness the battle with his own eyes, catching her completely off guard. Her eyes widen in shock as her slit pupils narrow, warning him that normal humans cannot survive being near such dangerous battlefield. She insists that no ordinary human mind could endure the sheer terror of facing high-tier monsters like fiery dragons in live combat. Our boy simply shakes his head with a calm smile, remaining completely unfazed by her dire warning. Pushing himself up from the desk, he makes it clear that he will not back down. Standing tall with firm determination, Ferda reiterates that he refuses to stay hidden inside while a real battle unfolds outside. Realizing he cannot be dissuaded, the maid takes action, whisking him straight into the open sky. Massive white dragon wings burst from the maid's back as she carries Ferda high above the clouds at incredible speed. Sunbeams stream across the rolling green plains below as they soar toward the battlefield together. Landing firmly on the grassy field below, Ferda prepares to observe the battle unfolding right before him. Ferda hits the grass on all fours after a rough landing, while his maid lands lightly behind him without breaking a sweat. Our boy can barely keep his stomach down from the intense air speed as she calmly dusts off her hands. He locks his gaze on the valley ahead, sensing something completely unnatural in the air. A sudden chill runs through his veins as the sinister energy radiating from the abyss grows stronger. Standing right at the edge of the cliff, a terrifying dark aura spills up from the chasm below them. A wave of pure instinctual shock hits Ferda like a freight train. Sweat drips down his face as the crushing pressure from the valley wraps around his throat. Down in the dark pit, giant centipedes and monstrous serpents writhe and tear into each other in absolute chaos. The sheer size of the beasts looming below turns the entire valley into a nightmare ground. Massive centipedes clash violently, sparking blinding energy as their armored bodies collide. A fiery red dragon swoops through the inferno, raining down total destruction on everything below. Twin serpents hiss loudly as swarms of giant creatures surge forward to meet them in combat. Razor-sharp claws tear through armor, leaving no room for error in this high-tier war zone. Power ripples through the air as another beast unleashes its raw physical strength. The red dragon rears back, glowing with thermal energy right before unleashing its deadly force. It flexes its wings, towering over the battlefield like an unstoppable force of nature. Flying straight toward the ground, the dragon opens its maw and prepares to incinerate the canyon. A massive pillar of fire breath erupts across the sky, completely scorching the earth. The explosive blaze turns the entire horizon into a blinding wall of heat and destruction. Even with intense heat waves blasting past them, the maid stands completely unfazed. The dragon lets out a deafening roar that shakes the very foundations of the mountain. Standing high on the peak, its terrifying dragon fear aura spreads for miles in every direction. The crushing pressure hits Ferda directly, instantly overwhelming his mind and body. He drops to his knees, unable to stand under the weight of a true dragon aura. He wonders inside his mind if a high-tier dragon was always meant to possess this level of terrifying power. Glowing eyes cut through the shadows, watching his every struggle from above. Ferda clutches his chest and gasps for air, his heart pounding erratically from pure fear. Hovering above him, the maid bluntly reminds him how ridiculous it is for an ordinary human to dream of bonding with a dragon. She points directly at the colossal fiery beast, declaring that this monster is the true form of the partner he claims he wants to stand beside. The silver-haired dragon maid stands trembling on the grassy cliff. Right in front of her, Ferda collapses to his knees, visibly exhausted after surviving her overwhelming aura. She glares down at him with cold suspicion. After witnessing such incredible power, she expects him to be utterly broken and terrified. Standing over him on the edge of the cliff, she mutters about the ancient blood of the red dragon that still flows within her line. The fiery phantom of the ancient red dragon roars vividly through her memory, unleashing immense pressure into the air. Ferda remains completely pinned to the dirt, trembling under the intense dragon pressure radiating off the maid standing above him. Dark fiery dragon eyes gleam menacingly in the shadows, threatening to crush anyone who dares look directly at them. Out on the desolate hill, Ferda stays bent double on the ground while she watches his motionless body carefully. Sweat drips down his face, but instead of trembling in fear, his lips slowly pull back into a wide smirk. Looking straight up at her, our boy mutters that her power is absolute perfection. The maid freezes in utter shock when she sees him smiling like a lunatic. Stuttering in total disbelief, she steps back and stammers at him, completely creeped out by his bizarre reaction. Her face contorts into pure disgust. She cannot fathom how anyone could find such terrifying dragon mana thrilling instead of horrifying. Night falls over the grand estate as the moon hangs quietly in the dark sky above the tall stone walls. Back in his room, Ferda lies flat on his back, covered in minor cuts and scratches from the intense encounter earlier. He is completely splayed out on the massive bed like a starfish, physically drained to the absolute limit. Turns out the silver-haired maid had to drag his unconscious body all the way back to his room after he passed out. Ferda closes his eyes and lets out a quiet sigh as he begins reflecting on everything that went down on the cliff. A single question echoes through his mind, asking himself why he was so desperate to see that legendary battle firsthand. Earlier that day, Ferda lay on the sunny hillside staring up at the open sky before the fight even started. Pushing himself up on the grass, our protagonist carefully analyzes every detail of the battle he witnessed on the cliffside. Suddenly, something clicks in his mind, making his eyes widen in realization as the details line up. He remembers the colossal red dragon roaring in a sea of flames right behind him, while he sat meditating amidst the chaos. The beast let out a deafening roar, unleashing waves of wild heat and primordial magic across the entire field. Then the female dragon knight stepped forward clad in majestic crimson armor, holding her glowing blade ready for war. With a single swift stroke, her red sword cleaved through the sky, unleashing an overwhelming crescent wave of magic. Standing right in the path of that magnificent technique, Ferda felt nothing but absolute awe at her refined swordsmanship. Back in the present, a sudden spark flickers deep inside his body, sending a strange twitch through his chest. Ferda gasps in shock as vibrant red lines of mana crackle across his chest, signaling the awakening of a red circle. Pain flares in his heart as ancient energy surges violently through his veins, mirroring the dark power he observed earlier. He envisions the red dragon knight standing beneath a swirling vortex of blood-red power, questioning the true nature of this sensation. Sweat pours down his face as he holds his pounding chest, carefully guiding the wild mana flowing through his body. As he focuses on every movement of her fight, his internal mana circuits clarify and solidify at incredible speed. Red energy wraps around his hand like a burning claw, resonating perfectly with the phantom dragon hovering in his mind. Closing his eyes, Ferda tunes out all external noise to focus entirely on controlling this newly awakened mana. Deep inside his mind, Ferda wonders what to even call this mysterious power surging through his spirit. Sitting cross-legged in a pool of swirling red mana, our protagonist concentrates fiercely to grasp the delicate power before it scatters away. Crimson energy swirls violently between his hands as he compresses the wild mana into a dense core. With complete composure, Ferda guides the volatile power straight toward his heart, establishing his very first mana circle. A dark void takes shape within his spirit, surrounded by crackling rings of crimson lightning. The raw power stabilizes, binding tightly into a condensed orb of pure red magic. Sparks fly as a perfect magic circle manifests directly above his palm, signaling the birth of his awakened power. Ferda opens his eyes and clutches his shirt, taking a steady breath as the surge subsides. Right on cue, the silver-haired maid bursts in holding a tray, staring at him in complete disbelief. She stammers out that he could barely even stand yesterday, shocked to see him up and moving like nothing happened. Our boy casually dismisses her panic while she stands there totally speechless, holding onto her tray. Wiping off the sweat with a towel, Ferda calmly remarks that he finally meets the minimum requirements. He drops the cloth, looking entirely unbothered after performing a feat that would break an ordinary person. Shortly after, they head out to the outdoor training grounds lined with wooden practice dummies. A soft scrape echoes across the dirt as the maid sweeps the practice field clean. Holding her broom, she turns around and gestures toward the target dummies for his evaluation. Our boy offers a deadpan slow clap, sarcastically telling her that she did an excellent job. She clutches her broom with both hands, staring back at him in complete confusion. A massive question mark pops over her head as she tries to figure out what he is planning. Ferda places a hand on his chest, asking if she thinks his training method seems primitive. His expression darkens slightly as he prepares to show her what true magic training looks like. Walking past her, he quips that she can watch if she wants to see someone practice breathing. Stopping in front of the dummies, he closes his eyes and shifts into a focused stance. Back in his past life, establishing a standard mana circle was routine, but his current circle burns a vivid red. To control this blood power, he must whip his emotions into a frenzy while maintaining flawless mental focus. Years ago, it took him a full year just to pull mana through the raging currents of his body. Blood drops from his fingertips as he forces the stubborn energy to take form, and it required another whole year of agonizing effort to condense that raw power into a solid orb. All of that grueling effort was for a single goal: recreating the legendary mana projectile from his past life. Back in the present, a miniature red sun ignites instantly at the tip of his finger. The maid flinches, her eyes wide with shock as the air pressure around them suddenly drops. Two more crimson spheres materialize out of thin air, hovering ominously around his outstretched hand. With cold precision, our boy locks his aim onto the central target dummy ahead. He unleashes his mana shot, sending crimson lasers tearing across the dirt field at blinding speed right into the target. A massive fiery explosion erupts upon impact, kicking up a dust cloud that blows the maid backward. As the smoke clears, Ferda smirks with a sparkle in his eye, casually noting that the dummy somehow survived. The maid glares at him in sheer disbelief, completely overwhelmed by the terrifying display of power she just witnessed. Deep inside a shadowy cavern, Ruri finishes reporting on Ferda to her horned master, who commends her for uncovering his surprisingly rapid awakening as a mage. However, the horned master admits she lacks enough information to truly measure Ferda's full potential just yet. Ruri adds that Ferda was completely flawless from the moment he arrived, executing every action without a single misstep. She grits her teeth in frustration, deeply troubled by how unnaturally perfect his behavior has been. Her master notices the maid reacting so strongly and tilts her head with growing interest. A subtle smirk forms on the demon lady's face, amused by her servant's obvious suspicion. Ruri looks up, sensing that her master is giving her full permission to voice her thoughts. Clenching her hands to her chest, she desperately wishes for a chance to test Ferda's true motives. A sharp glint fills her eye as a dangerous plan suddenly takes shape. Ruri speaks up to her master, proposing they take full advantage of this timing to put him to the test. Meanwhile, the grand hall falls quiet as our boy Ferda Risnova makes his entrance, looking calm and composed in his noble attire. Lords of the Far East Front Alliance gather around a massive circular table, whispering amongst themselves after an urgent summons. Two plump nobles gossip about why they were called. Word is spreading that the Archduke's new fiancé is about to enter the room. Shock ripples through the council as the lords question who this unexpected consort could possibly be. Rumors circulate throughout the hall that the incoming guy is a total weakling who cannot even swing a sword. Whispers echo through the grand chamber, while light streams in through tall, stained glass windows. At the head of the table, an elder lord sits motionless with shadowed eyes, waiting for the guest to arrive. Count Alvara Cancillus clasps his hands calmly, keeping his true intentions hidden from the rest of the council. The heavy double doors creak open, revealing Ferda Resnova stepping into the bright hall alongside his maid. Ferda walks forward with complete composure, remaining completely unfazed by the hostile glares directed his way. He remembers the Archduke's strict instructions before sending him off to confront these arrogant noble lords. In a brief memory, ancient texts lie open on his desk as he studied the history of this realm. Back when they spoke in private, Ferda listened intently to her orders regarding the eastern territories. Ancient records describe a dark entity born from pure evil that helped unleash the Demon King. Legends recall the terrifying black dragon Godwyn, whose dark flame once threatened to consume the entire world. Yet the person who managed to slay that fearsome dragon was the Archduke herself. She tasked Ferda with managing the eastern territories and keeping these scheming lords strictly in line. While she battles monstrous threats on the front lines, Ferda finds himself buried under mountains of administrative paperwork. He realized she was testing him by handing over authority over the council so early. Deep down, he knows she still does not fully trust his administrative capabilities just yet. Accepting his new responsibility without hesitation, our boy agreed to face the lords directly. Back in the present, Ferda stands tall at the center of the council chamber before the watchful nobles. Silence fills the room as everyone waits to see how the young fiancé will react under pressure. Our boy maintains a cool expression, completely ready for whatever verbal traps they lay out. The lords exchange subtle glances, knowing that whoever speaks first will dictate the power balance in this room. Count Alvara cracks a sneering grin, fully believing he can easily manipulate this young newcomer. The old count addresses the room with fake politeness, saying they ought to show respect to the prospective consort. Alvara puts on a gentle facade, confident that his political authority towers over everyone present. Neighboring lords chuckle quietly among themselves, convinced that Ferda will be nothing more than a puppet leader. Ferda keeps his hands resting calmly behind his back while listening to their smug chatter. A sharp, cold glint appears in his eyes as he prepares to completely shatter their expectations. Straightening his coat, he prepares to address the entire council with firm authority. Count Alvara leans forward attentively, eager to hear what excuses the young noble will offer. Ferda boldly announces that he will not meddle in their internal affairs, telling the lords to govern their own lands as usual. One hot-headed noble slams his fist onto the table in total outrage at the sudden declaration. Our protagonist simply raises a calm hand, signaling the furious lord to keep his composure. The arrogant noble scoffs, realizing exactly why Ferda got abandoned by his own family in the first place. Cold blue eyes narrow as the insult hangs heavily in the air. Pointing a furious finger, the lord shouts that a mere one-circle mage ought to show respect, accusing Ferda of holding power solely through his engagement to the Archduke. Ferda opens his mouth to respond, refusing to let the insult slide without an answer. Blood vessels pop in the noble eye as sheer rage completely overtakes him. A glowing red magic circle flares to life, while the furious lord fumes that a low-rank mage dares to disrespect a master like him. Sparking red mana surges around his hands. The enraged noble vows to beat some discipline into Ferda on the spot. Our protagonist simply raises a single hand, stopping the charging lord dead in his tracks before a spell can even form. With complete composure, Ferda proposes taking this argument to the duel arena to settle their dispute properly. Banners flutter over the grand arena, where word quickly spreads about an uneven battle between a one-circle and a four-circle mage. Spectators whisper among themselves that the match already has an obvious winner, while a silver-haired maid silently watches from the shadows. She keeps her gaze fixed on the arena floor, watching Ferda with intense, quiet focus. Both opponents take their places in the center of the massive stone arena under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Ferda stands tall with a calm look on his face, totally unbothered by the pressure. Veins throb on the arrogant noble forehead as Ferda's casual attitude pushes him past his limit. A sinister smirk creeps across the lord face, confident he is about to crush his younger opponent. Spreading his arms wide, the four-circle mage taunts Ferda to strike him right in the chest. The crowd murmurs in confusion as the lord continues shouting dramatically from the center of the ring. Ferda glances over sideways, remaining completely unfazed by the theatrical display. Chuckling under his breath, the foolish noble assumes Ferda is simply paralyzed by fear. Ferda's inner voice calmly notes that losing this match was never even a possibility. He raises his hand and casually gestures for his opponent to bring on his best shot. Losing all self-control, The enraged lord bellows at the top of his lungs and channels massive wave of red magic into his crystal brooch. Glitching geometric symbols and complex magic formulas expand through the air as the spell reaches full power. He throws his arms upward, unleashing a chaotic surge of purple and red energy straight across the arena floor. Watching the blast roar toward him, Furta realizes the Lord is intentionally overloading the spell with pure killing intent. He recognizes that casting magic with such wild emotions proves this guy is a red circle possessor. He scoffs in total disappointment, thinking it is a complete waste to see such immense magic used so recklessly. 3 blazing red fiery orbs tear through the air at high speed, aimed right for a direct hit. The arrogant noble suddenly freezes in terror as an overwhelmingly massive magic circle ignites directly above his head. Furta knows the outcome was already set from the moment the fight started. 4 glowing red spheres spin around Furta fingers, charged with insane amounts of compressed mana. Our boy fires the high-speed beams downward, forcing the panicked noble to scream for defensive magic and cast a green barrier. The red energy ribbons smash straight through the barrier like glass, leaving the Lord completely dumbfounded. A massive explosion shatters the noble defensive magic array into dust, ending the battle in one decisive strike. Cracks ripple across the massive magical circle before it completely shatters into glowing red fragments. Thessalos stares in sheer disbelief as his opponent obliterates a high-level spell into dust with a single move. Sparks rain down over the arena, while the defeated noble shields his head from the sheer force of the residual magic. Breaking an active spell circle requires precise mana control that very few mages in the kingdom ever master. Furta hovers a glowing sphere of mana right above his head, ready to erase him if he tries anything stupid. Not even top-rank archmages in the kingdom could pull off spell destruction with such effortless precision. His hand shakes violently against the cold stone floor as every ounce of his pride drains away. On his knees and completely out of mana, the noble gasps for air in front of the crowd. He pants uncontrollably on the ground while trying to process how easily his absolute defense was shattered. Furta stands towering over him with his hands behind his back and calmly asks if he surrenders. Thessalos looks up in complete shock, unable to believe how quickly he was forced to submit. Biting his lip in bitter frustration, the defeated noble swallows his arrogance and accepts his complete loss. The entire arena falls dead silent as the noble remains kneeling on the stone coat of arms. Even the onlookers whispering in the stands cannot deny the overwhelming reality unfolding right in front of them. Thessalos bows respectfully, praising the vast talent of Furta, while our boy graciously compliments his opponent. Furta listens quietly in silence, his dark blue eyes showing no warmth despite his polite words. A polite smile washes over Thessalos as he feels relieved that the intense battle is finally over. He formally introduces himself as Thessalos Vulture, offering his genuine respect to the young victor. But before Thessalos can finish his sentence, Furta looms over him with a sudden shift in tone. Furta darkens his gaze completely as a ruthless coldness replaces his calm composure. He presses a single finger against his forehead, catching Thessalos completely off guard. He cold-bloodedly whispers the spell command mana shot, without a single shred of hesitation. A concentrated beam of compressed red mana erupts right from his fingertip at point-blank range. The sheer explosive force of the spell snaps Thessalos back instantly before he can even react. Pure red energy obliterates everything in its path, delivering a fatal magic strike directly to his target. The noble audience screams in horror, unable to comprehend why a simple duel turned into execution. Thessalos collapses lifeless onto the floor while Furta stands towering above the body, covered in blood. Furta silently thinks to himself that a noble who poses a future threat could never be left alive. He casts a dark shadow over his face, completely unbothered by the brutal spectacle he just caused. With cold eyes looking down at the corpse, he prepares to face whatever consequences follow. Furta stands calm and composed in the grand hall right beside his defeated opponent, while the surrounding nobles watch the scene unfold in complete disbelief. A close look at the fallen noble reveals the intricate insignia pinned to his lapel, confirming his high status before his sudden demise. Shock spreads across the faces of the spectators as they struggle to process what just happened right in front of them. Everyone realizes the duel was already over, Yet Ferda ended his opponent before anyone had a chance to step in and stop him. Blood splatters across his cheek, but his gaze remains cold and unbothered as he looks out over the terrified crowd. He casually steps away from the corpse on the floor, walking toward the high-ranking officials without a single hint of regret. Approaching the white-bearded Duke, our boy calls out directly to him, making the old leader flinch back in surprise. Standing directly before the Duke, Ferda prepares to state his business, completely ignoring the heavy atmosphere settling over the room. The Duke stammers in utter shock, raising a trembling hand as he fails to comprehend the sheer nerve of the young noble. A faint smirk touches his face, making it clear that he holds absolute control over the conversation. He turns around and begins walking away, pointing out that Thessalos went directly against the original agreement. The Duke and his companions stand frozen in place, speechless as they watch him walk off without waiting for their approval. Whispers fill the hall as the onlookers find his sheer arrogance completely absurd and hard to believe. Ferda glances back one last time, declaring that he could not care less about what any of them think. Soon after leaving the hall, a horse-drawn carriage speeds down the dirt road, bouncing heavily over rocks along the path. Inside the carriage, Ferda slumps forward and clutches his forehead in pain while his maid watches him with concern. He groans as his head spins violently, suffering from the severe backlash of overusing his powers during the clash. In his mind, Ferda reflects on running into Thessalos' vulture, and how firing that single powerful mana shot completely drained his energy reserves. To make matters worse, the constant rocking of the carriage triggers severe motion sickness, leaving him completely miserable on the seat. His silver-haired maid sparkles with admiration, praising his incredible performance back at the arena as absolute perfection. Sitting upright once more, Ferda discusses their upcoming moves with her while trying to ignore his lingering dizziness. He finds the situation troublesome, remembering how easily other nobles tried to play politics and secure their own power. Looking down at the floor, he complains about corrupt lords greedily filling their pockets while the front lines face imminent collapse. Leaning back against the seat cushion, our boy stretches his tired neck and prepares for the next leg of their journey. He closes his eyes briefly, resting his head on his hand as he calculates his next strategic move. His eyes fall onto a tightly tied sack sitting beside the maid, bringing a specific memory back into focus. As the sun sets over the distant skyline, the grand silhouette of Wiltshire Castle comes into view in the warm evening light. They arrive at Wiltshire Castle, where an elderly butler bows deeply in respect as soon as the doors open before him. Standing tall inside the entrance, the butler prepares to welcome the unexpected visitors into the mansion. Our protagonist casually announces their arrival, catching the old servant off guard with his sudden command. The maid hands over the heavy cloth sack, leaving the butler completely bewildered as he holds the mysterious bundle. She points toward the inner gates, directing the stunned servant on where to take the delivery without giving further explanation. Tears well up in the eyes of the old butler as realization strikes him, overwhelming him with sudden emotion. A loud cry echoes throughout the massive estate, resounding off the high towers under the twilight sky. Entering a lavishly decorated bedroom with gilded walls and velvet curtains, Ferda chuckles, noting that taking over feels almost too easy. Ferda gets down on all fours to inspect the floorboards near the bed. His maid stands over him looking completely unimpressed as he searches for a secret trigger. While his maid looms over him with a terrifying aura and dark threats, Ferda stays totally unbothered and finally spots the hidden trigger. Our boy presses down hard on a concealed trigger built straight into the floor pattern. Ferda glances up only to realize his scary maid is still fuming with intense rage right beside him. Rather than waiting for a slow door to unlock, the maid cocks her fist back with terrifying force. She slams her fist straight through the stone floor, shattering the hidden entrance in a single brutal blow. Smoke clears to reveal a gaping hole. She casually tells Ferda the pathway is open now and steps downward without hesitation, leaving him speechless. A narrow flight of stone steps leads deep into a creepy dark cellar hidden beneath the bedroom. The moment both of them step into the basement, a vile stench hits them so hard they instantly cover their noses. It turns out this place is a secret underground laboratory packed with decaying remains of both humans and monsters. Rotting limbs and beast claws litter the floor, proving someone was performing horrifying dark experiments in secret. Etched onto the surface is a sinister purple crest, the distinct emblem of forbidden demonic magic. This mark belongs to cultists who threw away their humanity just to obtain the dark power of demons. A hooded alchemist once stood here, mixing wicked potions using human skulls and dark magic reagents. Ferda checks the potion jars lined along the shelves, realizing the victims used in these experiments were actually local soldiers from his own territory. They walk deeper through the laboratory, stepping carefully around grotesque hanging tendrils and ancient bloodstains. The mad researcher literally stitched together dead soldiers with monster organs to create synthetic abominations. That absolute lunatic was practically begging to die after committing such twisted atrocities down here. The maid narrows her eyes in pure disgust, her blood boiling at the sheer cruelty exposed before them. She reminds him that serving demons is a crime far worse than executing a noble, while Ferda begins sifting through documents on the workbench. Ignoring her rant, Ferda opens a thick handwritten manuscript, searching through pages of complex research notes for anything useful. As his eyes scan down the page, a specific section immediately catches his attention. Ferda stares in realization as he uncovers the core secret hidden deep within these secret records. The title reads Thessalo's unnamed masterpiece, the infinite mana cultivation method, a legendary secret technique long thought to be lost. Years ago, the hooded mage showed Ferda this exact grimoire, explaining that monsters continuously produce internal mana inside their bodies naturally. Back then, the old scholar noted that monster mana was completely useless to humans because of its severe impurity. But with an unhinged smile, the researcher theorized what would happen if someone could replicate a monster mana generation inside a human body. If they could convert that process to endlessly generate pure mana instead, it would change everything. The result would create an infinite source of pure magical power inside whoever mastered the technique. In the memory, the mad researcher threw his hands up, shouting that perfecting this formula would finally let him break past human magic limitations. He harbored a dark ambition that drove him to commit these horrific experiments in total secrecy. His master plan involved using a massive army of undead monsters he created from dead soldiers. That evil grin revealed just how ruthless the researcher was about fulfilling his sick fantasy. He gloated while staring at his notes, imagining the grand capital city falling before his overwhelming undead legion. His entire motivation was pure revenge against the high nobles who had demoted and banished him to this remote dragon territory. Ferda observes the memory of the mad researcher boasting about becoming an archmage, quietly processing every detail of what he just witnessed. He realizes this secret research formula could prove extremely useful for his own agenda moving forward. Seeing how deep the darkness runs, our boy pulls his mind magic back and snaps out of the memory. Ferda silently thanks the dead researcher for unknowingly handing over such valuable information. Back in the present, Ferda holds the physical notes, recognizing the exact cultivation method that once pushed his past self to the 8th circle. As he flips through the written pages, the shadowy ghost of his painful past seems to linger right behind him. He reflects on the tragic price he paid in his former life when he traded everything for raw power. Turning toward the maid, Ferda prepares to make a final choice regarding these dangerous documents. Surrounded by massive stacks of research, the maid congratulates Ferda on discovering the ultimate power shortcut every human dreams of finding. She notes that stealing the formula would be easy, but Ferda cuts her off with a firm refusal. Instead of keeping the legendary formula for himself, Ferda hands it over and calmly orders his maid to destroy everything in the lab. The maid flinches in utter shock, completely stunned that he would give up such a legendary shortcut to power. Ferda remains perfectly composed, knowing full well the hidden danger attached to this dark magic. Remembering how this formula corrupted its creator, he decides that destroying the cursed research completely is the only sane option. With steady resolve, Ferda narrows his eyes and gathers his magic to erase the dangerous research forever. The maid watches in silence as the ancient paper in her hands begins catching fire. Bright blue fire rapidly consumes the documents, burning away every single dark equation written on the pages. As she drops the blazing sheets, blue flames wash over the room while Ferda explains that every spell carries the raw emotions of its creator. A spellcaster's true nature becomes an inescapable part of their magic, and Thessalos filled his entire creation with pure hatred. Because that magic was forged in malice, Using it would allow that same toxic darkness to consume the user. Thessalos wielded a red circle born from inferiority, matching the exact hatred Ferda once carried inside himself. In the past, that mad researcher let vengeance eat away at his mind until nothing human remained. Ferda realizes that inheriting those formulas would drag him back into that endless cycle of hatred. He is resolved to leave behind his old self, who survived only by clinging to bitter resentment. Placing a hand over his heart, our boy lets out a quiet breath as the flames cleanse the final remnants of his past. Looking at his hand with a serene expression, he calmly remarks on how smoothly the cursed magic burns away. The maid gives him a side glance, completely lost for words at how casually he incinerated a masterwork. Releasing a soft sigh, she lets go of her remaining doubts and fully accepts his decision. Ferda teasingly tells her that showing up to her engagement party covered in blood scent would be terrible manners. Before she can say a word, he gently reaches out and takes her hand to guide her away. Grand Castle Complex sits nestled deep within a lush mountain valley, far away from civilization. Ferda Rusnova walks down the hallway while his maid asks if he finished writing his vows for the upcoming engagement ceremony. Holding the folded paper tightly in his hands, our boy confirms that everything is already prepared. His maid vents her frustration, complaining that holding an engagement ceremony in such a rundown place disrespects her master's prestige. She suddenly falls deadpan silent, staring straight ahead without saying another word. Crossing her arms angrily, she glares right at him while making her displeasure completely obvious. Ferda just adjusts his coat collar, ignoring her glare as they continue moving forward. Flashback reveals corrupt nobles feasting endlessly, taking advantage of the territory lack of oversight to line their own pockets. Meanwhile, the common people suffer under heavy burdens, walking in silence with heads hung low. With military force suppressing public discontent, a massive riot threatens to erupt at any moment. Ferda wonders if the Archduke stepping in directly would force everyone to submit with a single order. The maid reaches out and slowly pushes open a heavy set of dark doors. Inside, hundreds of brightly lit candles illuminate a vast subterranean stone cavern. Stepping into the warm glow, Ferda is instructed by his maid to take a seat and wait. As he kneels before the massive iron doors, a fiery draconic aura flares through the central gap. The overwhelming pressure crashes over Ferda, making him groan as he strains to stay upright. The crushing force seeping through the doors feels like it is going to pulverize his whole body. A giant glowing eye and massive claw peek out through the crack, making our boy question if he can truly handle facing Valdrova. The maid stands solemn in the center, announcing that today mortality and immortality become one. She carefully holds up a heavy crystal decanter filled with a clear ritual liquid. Pouring the drink into a ceramic bowl resting on the table before him, the ritual officially begins. Ferda lifts the bowl with both hands and gulps down the entire serving without hesitation. His eyes widen in shock as the burning liquid hits his throat. As the maid pours a second bowl while reciting her sacred chant, Valdrova giant claw reaches closer. The dragon claw slams down near the table, rattling the liquid inside the bowl. Instead of returning it, the dragon slams the empty bowl upside down. Raising the bowl, Ferda feels his head spinning while the maid continues her ceremony chant. Blushing heavily, our boy realizes this is his very first time drinking alcohol in this life, and he already drank way too much. While Ferda sways completely drunk, Valdrova claw reaches through the door crack and swipes the bowl right off the table. The maid twitches in sheer annoyance at the dragon childish behavior. Ferda struggles to stay awake at the small table, his head repeatedly nodding off from utter exhaustion. Losing his balance, he slumps forward over the table and drifts off to sleep. Suddenly, a furious roar echoes through the cavern, demanding to know what he thinks he is doing. Ferda snaps awake in total terror as his master scolds him at top volume. Sitting frozen on his knees, Ferda listens helplessly as Valdrova yells about enduring the ordeal. The furious shout bellows through the heavy doors, demanding to know what kind of impression this sleeping nonsense gives off to the fiancé waiting right outside. Vibrating through the stone walls, the roar orders Ferda to step up confidently and greet his betrothed like a real man. Ferda stays frozen flat on the ground while the maid stands silently by the massive entrance, waiting for the storm to pass. Ferda turns to the maid in complete disbelief, asking if she just heard what happened as she stands quietly by. A sudden realization hits Ferda as the maid explains the situation. Does the legendary dragon actually suffer from severe social anxiety around humans? Staring at the massive chained doors, he cannot believe that the mighty dragon Valdrova is literally terrified of people. A heavy metallic gauntlet slowly pushes open the massive doors from the outside. A figure clad head to toe in red dragon armor with a horned helmet steps into the room. It turns out her fix for human anxiety is wearing full plate armor. The fully armored dragon stomps right up to the table and sits down across from him, leaving Ferda completely speechless at the bizarre sight. A cold sweat breaks out on Ferda's face as he tensely awaits her reaction to his sudden outburst. With her voice booming inside the helmet, Valdrova solemnly declares that they will now resume the engagement ritual. The maid steps forward and pours glowing liquid into the ritual bowl, reciting ancient chants to bind mortal and immortal souls together. Bright liquid fills the bowl on the table while the armored dragon sits completely still, focused on the ceremony. Valdrova lifts her heavy gauntlet toward her helmet while Ferda watches intently, wondering how she plans to drink through metal. A gentle smile appears beneath the shadow of her visor, softened by glowing red light. Ferda gazes at her in awe, his heart skipping a beat as he catches a glimpse of her true warmth. Raising the bowl to her lips, Valdrova carefully drinks every drop from her share of the sacred vessel. Softly lowering the bowl, her lips curve into a fulfilled smile, having completed her vow. Ferda locks eyes with her, his mind swirling as he realizes it is now his turn to offer his pledge. Holding out the sacred bowl across the table, Valdrova silently waits for him to take his turn. Reaching into his white formal coat, our boy pulls out a folded sheet of paper containing his personal oath. Ferda gently unfolds the paper, taking a calm breath before reading his solemn words. Looking directly across at his armored fiancée, he begins reciting his heartfelt promise to stand by her side. Inside her helmet, Valdrova listens in total silence as his gentle voice fills the cavern. As he speaks, visions of dragon wings sweeping through shimmering light flash through his mind. Ferda remembers his first encounter with the majestic red dragon lying peacefully in the cave, a moment that changed his fate forever. With total conviction, Ferda solemn vows to stand by her side and prove his absolute loyalty. A gentle warmth envelops the room as his words resonate deep within her heart. Ferda offers her a bright, sincere smile, putting all his sincerity into this engagement. Finishing his speech, our boy sweats nervously, anxiously waiting to hear her response. The armored dragon parted her lips in quiet shock, utterly stunned by his heartfelt declaration. The maid twitches in frustration at her master's awkward silence, annoyed that she is not saying anything back. Suddenly, the armored dragon abruptly stands straight up, startling both Ferda and the maid. Without uttering a single word, Valdrova abruptly turns her back on him and prepares to leave. Stomping out through the massive stone doors, she exits the cavern, leaving Ferda completely stunned in her wake. The heavy stone doors slam shut, leaving our boy and the maid standing in dead silence. The maid calmly dismisses Ferda, informing him that he is now free to return to his quarters. She stands motionless, keeping her composure until he is completely out of sight. But the second he's gone, her stern mask melts into pure adoration. She turns to Valdrova, praising her master for executing such a brilliant plan. She admits that even she was totally fooled by her master's dramatic hit and run tactic. A loose sheet flutters through the air, catching the maid off guard. The maid reminds her how excited she was for this engagement, while the massive dragon buries her face in her claws, totally overwhelmed by shyness. Scratched-out oath papers cover the floor, while Ruri reflects on how she wanted to recite the companion oath herself. She breaks out into a cold sweat, visibly trembling as she struggles to muster the courage to face him head-on. Valdrova grins slyly, clearly amused that a humble maid has the nerve to face him without backing down. Valdrova remembers how Ferda captivated him with his sharp gaze and gentle voice. Surrounded by glowing embers, Ferda quietly reviewed the document before him, showing no fear as Valdrova observed the young prince's remarkably calm and fearless demeanor. Those piercing blue eyes and resolute aura left a deep impression that the dragon still remembers vividly today. While Valdrova dramatically swoons over his memories, Ruri stands beside him looking completely drained by his fanboying. She lets out a deep sigh, accepting that trying to reason with an obsessed dragon is completely hopeless. Turning serious, Valdrova cautions her that she must prepare herself for the disappointment that lies ahead. The Red Dragon solemnly warns that people inevitably change the instant they grasp authority. He notes how easily noble leaders transform into tyrants as soon as real power falls into their hands. Narrowing his golden eye, Valdrova stresses that this warning is the best piece of advice he can give. Ruri calmly acknowledges his concern, remaining fully confident in the unbreakable trust she has in her master. Meanwhile, night settles peacefully across the territory under the bright shine of a full moon. Back inside his private quarters, Ferda gazes silently out the window into the quiet darkness. He exhales a soft sigh, preparing himself mentally for the long night ahead. Lying flat on his bed, he folds his hands and settles in for the night. Reaching a hand up toward the ceiling, deep memories and quiet thoughts consume his mind before sleep. A fleeting memory of a smiling night suddenly flashes through his thoughts, stirring old emotions. Sitting up on the edge of the mattress, Ferda clasps his hands, ready to focus his energy. His eyes gleam as he prepares to relive that breakthrough moment once again. Wild crimson mana surges around his chest, thrashing violently as the red circle runs out of control. He knows that taming this chaotic energy will unlock a massive jump in his magic output. Standing tall with his luggage ready, our boy reflects on reaching this realm once before in his past life. He knows that taming this chaotic energy will unlock a massive jump in his magic output. Standing tall with his luggage ready, our boy reflects on reaching this realm once before in his past life. Inside his mana core, raw power swirls like a dense crimson whirlpool. Drawing on his archmage-level willpower, he forces the raging mana into complete submission. The spinning energy compresses down, forming tight black void at the center of his chest. With a final push, he condenses the power to construct his second mana circle. Red aura flares around his face as the breakthrough seals seamlessly into place. Darkness fades as a new day dawns over the territory. Walking down the stone corridor together, Ruri mentions she wondered why he had his door locked for so long. She glances over at him, curious about what he was up to all night. Ferda keeps his composure, stepping forward with total confidence as they head toward their next destination. Ferda strides ahead with complete composure, walking down the grand hallway to assume his official new duties. Years ago, his past life was defined by endless misery and desperate struggle under heavy darkness. He had walked through rivers of blood, surrounded by constant betrayal and loss. Years ago, his past life was defined by endless misery and desperate struggle under heavy darkness. He had walked through rivers of blood, surrounded by constant betrayal and loss. Ruri introduces Ferda to the king's office, where he will manage territory affairs under Archduke authority. The executive desk sits ready with quills and parchment, waiting for his administrative governance to begin. Taking his place behind the desk, Ferda assumes full command over internal governance without a moment of hesitation. He knows the entire royal territory has been rotting from complete neglect, abandoned by the Archduke for years. Years of official abandonment left local governance scattered, allowing unchecked corruption to take root across the realm. Fortunately, Ruri already paid a terrifying visit to the corrupt lords, scaring them into total submission. With that political trash thoroughly cleared out thanks to Ruri, taking charge of internal affairs becomes much easier. Ferda immediately begins drafting official letters to all the local lords he previously dealt with. A cold smirk touches his face as he pens an aggressive message they cannot possibly refuse. His written decree explicitly warns that as regent, he is stepping in to take full control over internal governance. Across the region, terrified nobles tremble in fear as they receive his uncompromising administrative orders. Ferda adds a savage ultimatum at the bottom, instructing them to stay silent out of respect if they disagree. Having forced the nobility into line, his attention shifts immediately to the next crisis plaguing the land. Vicious monsters are roaming completely unchecked near the borders, terrorizing innocent villagers and destroying essential resources. Their magical aura alone poisons the surrounding soil, turning fertile crops into barren, corrupted wasteland. Defenseless villagers lie slaughtered in the fields, completely helpless against beasts that contaminate everything. If left unchecked, this monster corruption could even agitate the ancient dragon sealed within the territory. Containing the threat passively will no longer work, forcing him to establish long-term solutions immediately. Back at his desk, Ferda tells Ruri that before dealing with monsters, he needs to recruit specialized talent first. Ruri takes the list from him, thoroughly baffled by the unfamiliar names written down on the paper. The paper lists obscure figures like Zed Swallow and Echidna Philias, complete nobodies with zero public reputation. She complains in disbelief when she realizes they have to travel out in person for their first target. What bothers her even more is that this primary recruit is just an unknown scholar with no credentials. They arrive at Escalrea, the city of scholars, a grand metropolis built around a massive ancient tree. Walking through the bustling streets, Ruri warns him that appointing unproven street scholars could cause major backlashes. She asks if he just randomly scribbled names, but Ferda reassures her that every name was chosen deliberately. Behind his calm expression lies a dark, secret motivation that Ruri couldn't possibly begin to fathom. In his past life, these very scholars were not allies, but top priority targets on his personal kill list. Back then, he spent his days consumed by hatred, tracking down every single genius who dared oppose him. He remembers every single target with terrifying clarity, driven by pure obsession in that former timeline. Looking back, Ferda realizes he spent his past life hunting indiscriminately for anything he could possibly despise. Now sitting beneath a scholar statue with Ruri, Ferda wonders how to locate his target in such a vast crowd. Just then, a street vendor nearby starts shouting at the top of his lungs to attract customers. The cheerful street vendor hawks sweet candied fruit skewers, calling them a favorite snack enjoyed by all the local academy students. Ferda steps up and asks the vendor if academy graduates frequent this street area often. He asks specifically about a scholar known around the area for being remarkably messy. Ruri zeroes in on that strange description, wondering what he could possibly mean by messy. She glares at Ferda, asking if he plans to mess up their clean castle. Ferda ignores her suspicion and decides to purchase candied fruit skewers to loosen the vendor's tongue. He places his order for all 3 treats, using food and coin to get the merchant talking. Stopping by a street stall, Ferda and Ruri gaze at the display of candied fruit skewers. He buys all 3 skewers on the spot, leaving Ruri caught completely off guard. When Ferda hands them over, Ruri tries to stay composed, but her eyes sparkle with hidden excitement. As Ferda asks if she likes them, Ruri flusteredly snaps back in denial. Our maid happily munches on the sweet candied fruit skewers, completely unable to hide how thrilled she actually is. When Ferda silently watches her indulge, she freezes with a skewer in her mouth and tries her best to play it cool. Realizing she broke character, she hastily pulls back to regain her proper maid composure. Feeling embarrassed, she timidly offers a skewer to Ferda and asks if he wants a bite. As dusk settles over the town, Ferda decides they should hurry before it gets pitch dark. Meanwhile, inside a dark room nearby, a single candle flame flickers softly in the silence. Suddenly, a panicked man with glasses collapses to his knees among scattered papers on the floor. Cold sweat pours down his face as sheer dread completely consumes him. Verida's Academy proudly celebrates the graduation of its 525th class, holding a grand title conferment ceremony for every scholar completing their studies. Freshly graduated scholar Bernal Marquis gets named the Messy Scholar, but before he can even celebrate, familiar voices suddenly call out his name from behind. Heavy hands drop onto his shoulders as rough men mock his ridiculous title, congratulating him only to remind him that his free time is officially over. Their sinister intentions hang in the air as they corner the poor scholar right after the ceremony. The lone shark flashes a wicked grin and demands every single coin Bernal borrowed to fund his academic career. Bernal sweats bullets while clutching his diploma tightly, realizing his mountain of debt has finally caught up with him. Panic completely overwhelms him as he tries to figure out how to escape these ruthless debt collectors. Tension explodes as the memory cuts straight to the brutal reality waiting back at his messy laboratory. Glass shatters across the wooden desk as the furious loan shark slams the furniture, screaming at Bernal's to hand over the money immediately. Bernal cowers on the workshop floor, desperately raising his hands and begging for a little more time while surrounded by towering enforcers. The loan shark plugs his nose in utter disgust, gagging at the foul stench radiating from the mysterious beast remains scattered across the floor. Bernal frantically explains that his research could save the entire continent, but the lone shark snaps back that continent-saving nonsense does not pay the bills. The terrified scholar stammers that his project still has too many variables, but the smug loan shark mocks him for being utterly clueless about how the real world works. Reaching into his pocket, the gang leader mentions that weapon manufacturing brings in real cash, suggesting a much bloodier line of work. A switchblade snaps open with a menacing glint, as the boss threatens to force Bernal into profitable military research. Bernal offers a terrified smile while desperately shielding his research papers, terrified that his life work is about to be ruined. The blade flies downward with lethal speed, piercing straight into the stone floor with a sharp crack. The knife buries itself mere inches between Bernal's legs, sending him screaming into a total panic as his hands shoot into the air. Shivering uncontrollably, the young researcher stares at the blade while trying to gather whatever little courage he has left. He refuses to give up his principles, boldly shouting back that he will never sell out his life research for cheap violence. That stubborn defiance is the final straw, proving to the lone sharks that words are completely useless on this guy. The thug leader delivers a brutal kick right into Bernal's chest, knocking the breath clean out of him. The scholar crashes against the stone floor, gasping in pain as the enraged boss orders his thugs to finish the job. Heavy boots rain down without mercy, as the two massive henchmen stomp Bernal repeatedly into the dust. Heavy blows land with sickening force, breaking the scholar's spirit as he takes the beating on the floor. With his glasses cracked and his face bruised against the pavement, Bernal curls up tightly, terrified that he will not survive this beating. Through the ringing in his ears, Bernal catches the calm sound of footsteps approaching from the doorway, along with an unfamiliar voice. Footsteps pause at the threshold as an unexpected noble visitor strolls in alongside his maid, casually announcing he has business with the battered scholar. Our boy Ferda Risnova looks down with a cold, composed expression, stepping directly into the chaotic scene without batting an eye. The lone shark takes a slow drag from his cigar and asks if this wealthy young noble got scammed by Bernal too. Ferda calmly denies it, prompting the thug boss to tell him to wait his turn outside until the beating is done. Ferda glares sharply at the thugs, his piercing blue eyes showing zero interest in playing by their petty criminal rules. Ferda makes his intentions clear, bluntly stating that he needs the scholar brain completely intact, not his ability to beg. Looking down at the battered man on the floor, Ferda proposes clearing Bernal's entire debt on the spot in exchange for his services. The lone shark freezes in disbelief, his cigar almost slipping from his mouth at the sudden fortune landing right in his lap. Rory slams down a massive sack of currency onto the wooden counter, making the entire room shake. The thugs freeze in shock as Ferda calmly states that he has more than enough money to pay. The lone shark bursts out laughing as he stares into a bag brimming with gleaming gold coins. Turning toward Bernal with a sinister smirk, the lone shark remarks how lucky the scholar is to find such a wealthy sponsor. Greedy fingers reach directly into the sack, eager to snatch up the golden fortune. The thug boss claims that this payment will officially wipe away every cent of the scholar debt. An iron grip suddenly clamps down on the lone shark wrist before he can grab a single coin. Ferda glares down coldly, warning the criminal that the transaction is not finished and asking where he thinks he is reaching. Our boy reminds him that he paid for a scholar with a functioning brain, not a battered cripple. Bernal clutches his bruised arm in the corner, realizing this powerful noble came specifically for his intellect. The lone shark struggles violently to pull away, terrified by the absurd strength packed inside a young noble man. Ferda tightens his grip until the bones grind, making the thug scream in agonizing pain. Letting out a tired sigh, Ferda decides these lowlifes are not even worth his personal effort. Rory steps up with slit reptilian eyes, locking onto the thugs with pure predatory intent. A massive wave of crushing physical pressure bursts out, slamming every thug face first onto the hard stone floor. Ferda looks down at the pinned gang leader, laying out two distinct choices for their future. Either they pay settlement money for wrecking Bernal, or they pay the debt in blood. Naturally, Ferda chooses the physical option without a single shred of hesitation. The lone shark trembles in absolute terror, suffocating beneath the shadow of inevitable doom. Only one logical outcome remains for people who cross the line. They must take an equal share of beatings to properly settle the compensation. Rory cracks her knuckles with a terrifying smile, glowing with lethal combat energy above the groveling thug. Brutal thuds and muffled screams echo through the alleyway beneath the heavy city rain. Violent crashes shake the wooden building as Ruri delivers an absolute clinic in discipline. The bruised thugs limp away in defeat, while Ruri happily dusts off her hands beside Ferda. Bernal calls out from behind, gratefully introducing himself as Bernal Marquis, the messy scholar. Adjusting his broken spectacles, the battered scholar politely asks for the identity of his savior. Ferda introduces himself with the Valdrova's family name, instantly sending Bernal into a state of pure shock. Bernal panics and drops to his knees, begging for mercy after failing to recognize the Archduke consort. The scholar slams his forehead against the floorboards in frantic, desperate reverence. Looking up through fractured glass, Bernal realizes the supreme powerhouse standing right before him. A massive question mark pops into his head as he wonders why such royalty needs a broke researcher. Ferda maintains his calm, aloof composure, completely unbothered by the scholar's dramatic meltdown. Our boy extends an open hand, inviting the brilliant scholar to stand up and talk business. Bernal clasps his hands together with sparkling eyes, entirely devoted to his new master. Watching Bernal celebrate uncontrollably on the floor, Ruri leans toward Ferda and whispers her doubts about the scholar's mental sanity. Bernal's excitement quickly evaporates as a dark frown crosses his bruised face, replaced by sudden hesitation. The scholar nervously asks for clarification, terrified by the thought of being ordered to forge deadly war machines. Steeling his resolve, Bernal swallows hard and prepares to speak his mind regardless of the consequences. Ferda waits patiently, letting the trembling researcher find his voice before laying out his personal principles. Bernal officially refuses the offer, arguing that weapons only bring death and that he desires lasting peace for this land. Our boy calmly stares down the defiant scholar, unbothered by the rejection because he already anticipated this exact response. Ferda counters by questioning whether Bernal truly understands the threat posed by the monsters he studies. He asks Bernal if he knows how many innocent people a single beast slaughters in the East, leaving the scholar completely speechless. Every 3 days, Archduke Valdrova marches straight into savage territories, crawling with colossal beasts to protect the realm. She holds back monstrous swarms at the edge of the abyss, shouldering the entire defense alone. Even with supreme dragon power, enduring non-stop combat against titanic horrors takes a brutal toll on her body. Valdrova fights at the frontline vanguard every single week, putting her own life on the line without hesitation. Yet the people living back home remain completely oblivious to the horrific battle she wages for their survival. Ferda points out that society comfortably enjoys peace while standing entirely on top of her silent sacrifices. Developing powerful technology is the only way to lighten Valdrova's burden and ensure she survives the endless onslaught. That is why our boy extends an official contract, offering this mocked outcast the position of chief researcher. Bernal stares at the crimson scroll in pure astonishment, stunned that his taboo knowledge is needed for something noble. The scholar's hands tremble violently as the weight of Ferda's mission washes away all his lingering doubts. Looking down at him, Ferda recalls the grim future that originally awaited this brilliant inventor. In that dark timeline, Bernal was left completely abandoned among scorched ruins after everything he loved was destroyed. Broken by tragedy, he had walked a lonely path of despair through the ashes of the fallen world. Their carriage rolls through the rainy dark forest. Ruri worries about leaving the Marquis behind, without securing a definite answer to their proposal. The scholar begged for time to process the shock, which is why she wonders if walking away so easily was really the right move. Ferda reassures her that Bernal will come running once his head clears, teasing her about how much she enjoys human fruit skewers. Chewing her treats with puffed cheeks, she insists she is merely fueling up to survive the exhausting road ahead. Ferda shifts his focus to the confidential dossier in his hand, ready to hunt down an even rarer talent. His notes highlight the legendary Red Eye tribe, a bloodline long believed to have vanished from the continent. This mysterious clan possesses legendary ocular powers, capable of instantly analyzing and dismantling complex magic circles. Such unique vision makes them the ultimate counter against high-tier mages and ancient arcane traps. A survivor from this extinguished lineage is an invaluable asset for anyone looking to build an empire. Ferda wonders how to locate someone hiding so deep off the grid, asking Ruri if their remaining budget can cover an extra detour. When she confirms they have an entire cartload of funds left, he decides to immediately head straight for Hallam. She gasps in disbelief, completely stunned by the wild destination he has in mind for spending their remaining funds. Knowing Hallam is infamous for gambling, she worries that their journey is about to get extremely chaotic. Rising across the desert stands Hallam, a shimmering den of gamblers and high rollers where fortunes change hands overnight. Stepping inside the golden gambling hall, the opulent palace buzzes with wealthy nobles throwing around insane sums of money. Sitting at the high-stakes table surrounded by admirers is Zed Swallow, enjoying the luxury of wealthy patrons. Bets pile high across the velvet felt as players desperately try to claim the growing mountain of chips. A massive stack of gold chips crashes onto the table, making everyone in the room freeze in disbelief. Ruri rolls in a wooden cart loaded with pure gold coins, turning every head in the entire casino. Ferda strides into the parlor with absolute swagger, ready to wager an absurd amount to catch the attention of his target. Zed turns around with raised eyebrows, intrigued by the newcomer who just brought an entire treasury to the table. Walking forward, Ferda takes his place opposite Zed, making his presence known without uttering a single unnecessary word. Both Ferda and Ruri stand ready to face their recruitment target as the gambler begins to address them. Zed greets them with a charming grin, asking if they came for him and welcoming any challenger bold enough to face him at poker. The first card hits the felt as the high-stakes poker duel officially kicks off between the two players. Zed flips over a mediocre hand, acting dramatic as his modest pair fails to hold up. Leaning back with a laugh, he brushes off the loss as if the chips mean nothing to him. The dealer pushes the pot forward, declaring Ferda the clear winner of the opening round. Zed playfully flirts with the noblewoman beside him, blaming his early loss on her lack of cheering. Ferda sees right through the act, noticing that Zed cares far more about entertaining his wealthy patron than winning cards. Using sharp wit, good looks, and flawless sleight of hand, Zed keeps high society wrapped around his finger. In a city governed entirely by wealth, he thrives effortlessly as the darling of rich aristocrats. Zed chuckles as cards are dealt, admitting he had fun and hopes they can play together often. Ferda grips his cards with a cool stare, completely unaffected by the gambler charm and ready for the real contest. Zed narrows his gaze with an amused grin, questioning why Ferda came all this way just to show off in front of a woman. Ferda locks eyes with his smug opponent, calmly preparing to drop a revelation that will completely derail the entire card game. He announces plainly that he is searching for Amelia, catching Zed completely off guard. Zed freezes in shock, his playful gambler mask shattering the moment he hears his sister's name. His friendly smirk instantly turns menacing as hostile intent radiates across the entire table. Ferda calmly pushes his chips forward, declaring an all-in bet to force his target's hand. Ferda does not hesitate for a second, shoving his entire mountain of chips forward in an all-in bet. Zed smirks with total confidence as he matches the massive wager, ready to claim an easy victory. Revealing a winning straight flush, the gambler sweeps the entire pot while Ferda accepts defeat with total composure. Instead of celebrating his win, Zed leans forward with a fierce glare, sensing this defeat was entirely deliberate. He demands that Ferda and Ruri follow him to a private room away from curious onlookers. Behind closed doors, the magical disguise fades away, and Zed's hidden crimson eye is fully exposed. A stiff drink is poured out as the tense atmosphere shifts into a private interrogation. Sitting across the table, Zed prepares to confront his mysterious guests about their true motives. His composure breaks completely as he lashes out, frantically demanding to know if Ferda is allied with the thugs from his past. Rage explodes out of him as he screams, desperately demanding to know where they took his sister. Ferda calmly addresses his disguised crimson eyes, firmly clarifying that he has zero connection to those criminals. He calls out Zed's gambler persona, pointing out that this carefree attitude is merely a front. With sleight of hand capable of bankrupting the entire casino, his true purpose clearly goes beyond wealth. Ferda points out that flattering aristocrats over cheap rum is just a desperate, calculated ploy. Everything he does is simply to gather high society connections to track down his younger sister, Amelia. Ferda understands the terrible hardships the Swallow siblings suffered simply for belonging to the Red-Eye tribe. Ruthless mages hunted their people mercilessly in the past, forcing the young siblings to live on the run. After losing Amelia in the chaos, Zed disguised himself to pry information from influential aristocrats. Swallowing his pride, Zed had no choice but to mingle with the upper class to seek help. Yet those wealthy elites only treat him as a novelty, laughing behind his back without offering real help. To the upper class, a skilled gambler is nothing more than temporary entertainment to be cast aside. Ferda bluntly tells him that no matter how much gold he wins, nobles will never truly aid his search. Pushed to his limit, Zed snaps back, desperately asking what other choice he even has left. He clutches his head in sheer frustration as the hopeless truth of his situation crashes down on him. Just as despair completely overwhelms the desperate gambler, Ferda calmly assures him there is another way out. Our protagonist sits upright with absolute confidence, ready to make a bold life-changing proposal. Introducing himself as the future consort of Valdrova, Ferda officially extends a royal offer. He invites the stunned gambler to join his side and serve as his personal attendant. Zed narrows his eyes with heavy suspicion, questioning if the Red Dragon's future consort is actually serious. Ruri presents the official appointment scroll, as Ferda promises him the real influence needed to rescue Emilia. Holding the scroll in his hands, Zed realizes this is his genuine chance to enter high society. Heavy silence fills the room as Zed wrestles with disbelief, knowing an opportunity this good almost never comes around. His mind races as he weighs the deadly risks against saving his sister, knowing another chance like this might never come. Zed swallows his pride and admits the proposal is tempting, though he immediately demands a proper salary and strict conditions. He stresses that he needs the money, but firmly warns that any ulterior motives regarding his abilities will void the deal. Setting clear boundaries, he threatens to walk away immediately if exploited, though privately worries an exposed asset might never leave alive. Putting his lingering doubts aside, Zed officially agrees to accept the position as long as Ferda upholds every single condition. Ferda accepts without hesitation, adding his own condition that the contract will end once Zed's sister is finally found. Our boy calmly picks up a pen to draft the official contract, completely unbothered by the high stakes involved. Zed lunges forward in total shock, stunned that Ferda would simply release him instead of enslaving or selling him off. Ferda calmly jots down the terms of their agreement, treating what could be an illegal deal like standard noble paperwork. He makes it clear that he has no interest in buying people, promising Zed total freedom once their business concludes. The gambler stares back in absolute disbelief, stunned that an aristocrat would ever offer him such an unusually fair deal. Finding it hard to trust noble promises, Zed scoffingly calls the whole proposition ridiculous fairy tale. Ferda quietly watches the stunned thief, knowing full well that this simple bargain completely alters the man's grim destiny. He recalls that in the original timeline, this broken man eventually turned into a legendary phantom thief who escaped every infamous prison. Zed gently taps his glass, amusedly noting that this young noble is unlike any aristocrat he has ever encountered. Taking a slow sip of his drink, the thief finally lowers his guard and decides to accept the unusual partnership. Ready to get straight to work, Zed asks what grand first task the future consort wants him to carry out. Whatever outrageous assignment leaves Ferda's mouth immediately makes the newly recruited gambler freeze and choke in pure disbelief. He frantically tries to swallow down his drink, struggling not to spit his alcohol straight across the table. Zed sits completely paralyzed with question marks swirling around his head, dumbfounded by our boy's ridiculous request. Meanwhile, an eerie, isolated cabin hidden deep within the shadowy woods under the night sky. Black Raven glides through the moonlit mist, letting out a sharp cry above the dark and silent forest. Deep in the woods sits an isolated wooden cabin shrouded in shadows, hiding away from the rest of the world. Staring at the eerie cabin, Zed whines nervously about why their destination had to be a terrifying witch's hideout. Zed explains that he fully understands the dangerous mission Ferda is entrusting him with out in these dark woods. When Zed casually asks about his commission fee, Ferda bluntly replies that his payment was already settled up front. Ferda reminds him that all the gold coins wagered at the betting house served as his advance payment. Zed awkwardly chuckles, insisting that gambling debts and actual mission payments ought to be treated as completely separate matters. A chilling, terrifying voice suddenly booms from behind, aggressively asking if he has a problem with his fee. Ruri's hidden fury manifests like a rabid, bloodthirsty beast ready to tear him apart on the spot. Terrified by her murderous aura, Zed instantly agrees to work for free and swiftly pivots to the seduction plan. Stroking his chin with renewed pride, he boasts that charming, dangerous women just happens to be his greatest specialty. Posing glamorously with complete confidence, he gets ready to sweep the reclusive witch right off her feet. Stepping right up to the cabin entrance, he delivers confident knock on the heavy wooden front door. Ruri watches him skeptically, highly doubtful that such a reckless seduction plan will actually produce any positive results. She sternly warns that the notorious witches of Philias are far too dangerous for cheap parlor tricks. Entering their sinister territory carries lethal consequences, and an unwary trespasser will never walk out of there alive. The witches of the Philias Coven are notoriously cruel sorceresses who dwell deep within the shadows of darkness. These terrifying witches of the Red Circle were forged entirely from dark hatred and violent, unyielding desires. Bound together by sinister blood sorcery, the sisterhood relies only on each other and trusts no living outsider. Worst of all, these vindictive sorceresses harbor a vicious, deep-seated grudge against every single man they encounter. Ferda casually dismisses her grim warning, reassuring her that danger will not be an issue today. He reveals that the witch inside Echidna was actually cast out and branded a heretic within Philias. Ruri reacts in total bewilderment, unable to fathom how a witch could possibly be deemed a heretic. Meanwhile, at the doorway, Zed puts on a strained smile as nervous sweat trickles down his face. The poor gambler internally panics, desperately wondering if this bizarre situation is actually going according to plan. Echidna passionately hugs his chest in ecstasy, having been excommunicated purely because of her uncontrollable obsession with handsome men. She drools with unhinged excitement, completely mesmerized to have such an attractive young man at her door. Seated at her wooden table, Echidna happily clasps her hands together and hums in utter romantic bliss. Zed sits sweating nervously under her gaze, while Ferda and Ruri quietly observe the absurd spectacle. Her eyes swirl with manic delight as she laughs uncontrollably about how wonderfully lucky she is today. Heavy, utterly awkward silence settles over the entire cabin before anyone manages to speak up. Zed forces a stiff smile through his exhaustion, while Ferda finally steps forward to take charge. When Ferda casually brings up the special golem she is crafting, Echidna gasps in complete shock and confusion. Ferda politely asks her to show them the prototype, but she instantly shrieks and flatly refuses to cooperate. She slams the wooden table in desperate protest, fiercely determined to keep her secret project hidden from them. Yet internally, Echidna realizes she cannot bear letting such handsome guests leave without showing off her prized craft. Breaking into a bashful giggle, the witch finally caves and decides to reveal her top secret magical creation. The tall wooden wardrobe in the corner begins to creak open, slowly parting its heavy cabinet doors. Out emerges a wooden mannequin posing in a ridiculously glamorous stance amidst blooming roses, leaving everyone entirely speechless. A sparkling close-up reveals the mannequin's hilariously hand-drawn, handsome face, embodying Echidna's unhinged romantic desires. Echidna blushes furiously while explaining that she is constructing her ultimate vision of masculine perfection, giving Zed an uncomfortable laugh. A life-sized wooden mannequin strides smoothly into the room as the eccentric witch proudly introduces her creation. Suddenly leaning right into the witch's face, the wooden construct catches Echidna completely off guard and makes her blush intensely. Gazing down at her with painted handsome smile, the wooden mannequin leaves Echidna squealing in absolute romantic delight. Zed, Ferda, and Ruri freeze in utter silence, completely baffled by the bizarre spectacle unfolding right before their eyes. Ferda immediately catches on to the bizarre display, wondering if the autonomous puppet truly just acted on its own judgment. Echidna clarifies that the golem was merely assessing her mood before turning around toward the kitchen cabinet. Reaching high onto the wooden shelf, the machine carefully picks out a jar of tea leaves suited for her state. It grabs the proper herbal blend without receiving direct commands, showing an astonishing level of programmed intuition. Holding a fresh cup on a silver serving platter, the glowing core in its chest demonstrates an extraordinary capacity for adaptive learning, a magical construct capable of interpreting human emotions and acting independently proves to be an astonishing feat of magical engineering. Watching the golem politely serve warm tea to its creator, Ruri whispers to Ferda that this witch is no ordinary artisan. Ruri asks our boy if he knew Echidna was a rune maker, a rare artisan with fewer than 10 on the continent. Because runes form the core foundation of all magic circles, anyone capable of crafting them holds immense magical authority. While standard spellcasters merely combine existing symbols, a true rune maker can manifest entirely original runes to forge brand new spells from scratch. Curious about her unique path, Ruri asks why someone with such extraordinary talent chose to focus on building wooden golems. Echidna shamelessly confesses that she unlocked her magical circle purely out of an overwhelming craving for handsome men, stunning Ruri completely. The witch whines about never being able to get a boyfriend, leaving Ruri sweating at her bizarre romantic desperation. Zed trembles in utter terror after hearing that her fellow coven sisters turned men into living taxidermy or mind-controlled puppets. Echidna casually admits that she found such cruelty uncomfortable, which is why she decided to manufacture polite wooden men instead. Ferda sits quietly with his hand on his chin, knowing her genius talent is exactly what his territory needs to prosper. Having gathered all the information he needed, our boy prepares to steer this chaotic conversation back to serious matters. He clears his throat loudly to regain control of the room and bring everyone's focus back to official business. Calling her by her full name, Ferda firmly states that their casual discussion has now come to a formal end. Ferda slides an official appointment scroll across the table, formally inviting the eccentric witch to become his territory's second chief researcher. Framed alongside the handsome brown-haired swordsman and pretty maid, Ferda pitches his team with irresistible aristocratic charm. He promises she will have complete freedom and royal backing to advance all of her experimental research without restriction. Surrounded by handsome men and promised endless research opportunities, Echidna blushes furiously as her heart pounds with ecstatic joy. Clasping her hands tightly against her chest, the overjoyed witch can barely contain the excitement rushing through her. Her eyes spin in dazed intoxication, completely captivated by the irresistible offer laid out before her. Completely overwhelmed by the dazzling lineup before her, she screams with frantic excitement that she will follow him anywhere. With her recruitment successfully settled, the group heads toward the waiting carriage into the night to begin their journey home. Ferda reflects on his existing scholar Bernal Marquis, picturing the eccentric magic engineer already working hard in his territory. Walking behind Zed, Echidna stares at him with starry eyes and an unhinged grin, completely obsessed with her coworker. Ferda considers how pairing Bernal Marquis with Echidna will give his territory two brilliant eccentric researchers to drive their development. Echidna eagerly agrees with absolute devotion, trailing right alongside Zed as the entire party approaches the carriage. She casually mentions that all of her research equipment and belongings have already been packed into subspace storage magic. Giggling with pure madness, the witch excitedly drags the nervous swordsman inside the carriage, while our boy notes her terrifying obsession. Ferda realizes he will need to keep a reliable countermeasure by her side to manage her out-of-control fixation. Turning toward the pair, Ferda instructs Zed and Echidna to depart ahead of the rest toward Valdrova Castle. While Echidna radiates pure joy at their upcoming trip together, Zed freezes in absolute horror at his fate. Ferda explains that he and Ruri will stay nearby tonight and return to the castle the following day. Panicking, Zed frantically asks if Ferda should keep his attendant along to guarantee his personal safety instead. However, the young lord calmly shuts down his plea, insisting they will be completely fine alone. Besides, Echidna looms with sinister delight, knowing she has the terrified gambler all to herself. As she lets out a creepy giggle in his ear, the poor gambler looks completely traumatized. Desperately reaching out trembling hand, Zed realizes he cannot escape being trapped with this witch. Unable to hold back his sheer terror, he lets out a frantic scream into the night. He begs Ferda at the top of his lungs to take him along instead of leaving him behind. The next day, the party arrives at a peaceful lakeside village nestled at the foot of towering green mountains. Traveling down to the sparkling riverbank, they set out to locate the final recruit on their list. Walking beside Ruri, Ferda feels immense relief after finally spotting a familiar and renowned name on his list. He recalls a legendary archmage from his past life, revered across the continent for supreme magical authority. In his memories, This respected master had famously rejected imperial summons to live a life of quiet seclusion. Seeing his confident expression, Ruri immediately speaks up to correct his massive misunderstanding about their target. She reveals that the renowned old sage is merely an associate, leaving Ferda completely baffled by the news. Nearby along the riverbank, someone is hard at work scrubbing laundry in the cold mountain water. Instead of a grand archmage, their real recruit turns out to be a quiet blonde peasant girl.